It's no secret that the ATF has traditionally not been a friend to the Second Amendment. And the ATF is a policing force that, in theory, should be focusing on alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives. But most of their energy is really put towards anti-Second Amendment efforts, generally because of who is put in charge by administration, that sort of thing. Now, I have argued a lot over the last few years that really all of the alphabet agencies out there have established a military/police force, and that really all of that has to be abolished, and that the policing should be left to the Department of Justice and the FBI, that sort of thing. And the ATF is really serving as an administrative branch of the federal government that is aimed towards tearing down the Second Amendment, is what it seems like if you just look at what it is they do and what it is they say. That is a vast majority of the energy that goes from the ATF. Now, that we're entering into 2025, there is a no-nonsense bill that was just introduced by Congress, being led by two Republicans, one from Missouri, one from Colorado, as well as endorsed by 8 others. And this is referred to as the Abolish the ATF Act of 2025. So what is this? Because if you look at this particular act, it is no nonsense. Typically, when you looked at particular bills or acts, what you see is a lot of nonsense. A lot of people trying to slip things in there that have nothing to do with what it's actually about. It's hundreds of pages of just slipping things in that we want to try to get in, hoping that you don't actually read any of this stuff. This thing is no nonsense. So what are the chances of it even passing? And what does it actually say? And that's what we're going to take a look. Well, let's stick to the easy part. The easy part is what it actually says, which is just one sentence. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives is hereby abolished. That's it. That's what I love about this particular bill. Now, what are the chances of this actually playing out? Because ultimately, what I would argue is that with a Republican-controlled House and Senate, that I believe it's going to go through the House maybe easily. One might argue, I'll take easily back, but it could make it through. And beyond that, I think its biggest hurdle at that point is going to be the Senate, but I believe it could make it through the Senate as well. But it has to be signed by the president, and that's where I kind of might argue the brakes are going to be put on. I would love for the new president to abolish the ATF, but I'm just not sure what he's going to do with the ATF, and I'm not sure abolishing it is in his plans. So something that I've learned about the incoming president is that typically he has an agenda for things that aren't necessarily what the Republican agenda is. And I'm not so sure he's going to sign it. So I'm going to put the chances of the Abolish the ATF Act of 2025 passing all the way through the presidency as low. I'm going to say that there's a low possibility that the president's going to sign it. I think there's a high probability it's going to make it through the House. I think there's a reasonable probability it's going to make it through the Senate. And I think there's a very, very low probability that the president is going to sign it. Now, what does the president intend to do with the ATF? That's a gigantic question mark, with the current head of the ATF resigning effective the Friday before the incoming president takes office, there's just going to be this void. And I do believe there'll be some sort of an interim put in place, but I predict there's just going to be a void, and that not a lot is going to happen with the ATF for the first year, is my prediction, that it's just going to kind of be stagnant and barely running at all. But I don't think the president's going to chop its head off. And I don't think he's going to empower it either. So I think just letting it sit there doing nothing is probably his plan at first, to be quite honest. So I don't think cutting the head off of the ATF is part of his agenda. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it is. So that's why I don't think that this particular bill is going to make it all the way through signed by the presidency. You know, this very simple, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosive is hereby abolished. I don't believe is going to make it all the way through. Now, I will say that if you're like me, you'd like to see it go through. I'd love to see this go through. I just don't think it's gonna. That doesn't mean that we should just throw up our hands and say, well, for sure it's not gonna. This is just what I think. Now, what I will say is that what we can do and what's within our control is reach out to your congressmen, your senators, and let them know that you want to see the Abolish the ATF Act of 2025 go through and be passed. So I don't think there's anything wrong with reaching out to them. I think that'll only help. You know, a lot of times I think with such a simple act, it's really pretty much, do you want to cut the head off of the ATF, yes or no? Check yes or no. That's just straight up what this is. So I think when people think about that, even if they want to see that happen, they have hesitation because it's chopping the head off of the ATF. Should it be done? And I think the more people that reach out to them and say, yes, it should be done, kind of gets them leaning that direction, if that makes sense. So the best things we could do is reach out to your representatives, your federal representatives of your state, for your senators and your congressmen, and tell them you want to see it go through. I don't think it hurt to write the president. Tell him you want to see it go through as well. But I just don't think it's gonna. I'm just being honest. I think it'll make it through the House, probably make it to the Senate. I don't think the president's gonna sign it. Just my opinion. I could be wrong, and I hope I am. But that's where I'm at right now with this Abolish the ATF Act 2025. Not real darn hopeful in it, if that makes sense. So there you go. Love to know your thoughts or insight on this. Definitely put it below. I do want to take a moment and say that most people watch the channel, hey, they're not subscribers. Click that subscribe button. Greatly increases the algorithm and our ability to get these messages out. That link is below. But the most important part of this channel, we take prayer requests. So please don't ever, ever hesitate to send that in. Thank you for watching this episode of God, Family, and Guns. And as always, love God, love your family, love guns.